Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. As we get underway here this morning, we'd like to begin, and we wanted to share with you a short video of Dr. Fry from our Northwood archives.
We are among the most influential undergraduate and graduate institutions of management anywhere. Many industries have counted on us for years. Entrepreneurship and practical management as a global development model is a clear winner, and we are its most active advocates. Our future depends on the enrollment resources necessary to conduct our programs, the facilities sufficient to support the educational process, and the endowment necessary to perpetuate them. Northwood has an exciting road to travel, and with the help of those who believe in the enterprise philosophy, a very rewarding journey. Together, our task is just beginning.
Please welcome to the podium from Northwood University, Mr. Warren Malt.
Good morning, and thank you for being with us. I'm humbled and honored to serve as your host this morning as we celebrate the life of an incredible husband, father, grandfather, brother, colleague, and mentor, Dr. David E. Fry, President Emeritus of Northwood University. This is the story of your alma mater so far. Our co-founders dreamed an unlikely vision of a private university that could reshape enterprise to help the world achieve its potential. With these words, Dr. David Fry opened One Northwood 50 years. Co-founders Dr. Arthur Turner and Dr. R. Gary Stauffer went on to say, "We all knew it would happen, but we sure didn't know how." Well, David did. On behalf of all of us at Northwood University, welcome to this celebration of life for Dr. David Fry. Claudia, Julie, Daniel, family and friends, we gather today to celebrate a life well lived. I want to highlight David's life at Northwood. This is no small task, and to think I knew the depth and breadth of David's many contributions. We will also hear from several colleagues, friends, and family this morning, as we have the privilege of sharing beautiful moments, personal details, and happy memories. This book, celebrating the school's history, clearly articulates that a new era was beginning to dawn under the leadership of Dr. David E. Fry, our Northwood president and CEO for 24 years, from 1982 to 2006. As we reflect on the 1980s, we see that it was a difficult period at Northwood, but ultimately rewarding as a new era in the school's history began to dawn under David's leadership. Looking back at the 80s, Northwood was at a crossroads where it needed to switch the focus from nurturing a new school to managing a maturing institution. It was a time for new leadership, administrative transitions, institutional expansion, and program innovations. Moreover, it was a time to shift the emphasis from free enterprise building Northwood to Northwood building free enterprise. So who was David Fry? At the tender age of 22, David Fry was part of an extraordinary faculty class recruited to Northwood in 1965. David became an intellectual descendant of Dr. Orville Watts, Northwood's first legendary faculty member who gave shape and form to the Northwood idea. David began his distinguished career as an economics professor with research and teaching interests in business, global economics, and free markets. He was beloved in the classroom and within just 2 years, David was named Outstanding Teacher of the Year, voted by students in 1967 and again in 1968. He was so talented that the school's founders, Arthur and Joanne Turner and Gary and Willa Stauffer, promoted him to an administrator role in 1969. We all know that David really enjoyed teaching, but he had an inherent gift for leading. He inspired optimism and influenced many to share a common dream. Two elders who have passed on shared that optimism. During David's tenure, Don Hunkins, Vice President of Finance, worked closely with David, and Don had the greatest respect and affection for David and Claudia. David listened carefully to Don as difficult decisions had to be made, even though it pained David. Don and David Fry made a great team. Another key Dr. Fry colleague, Dr. David Long, was a kind and patient man, ahead of his time in enrollment management, and brought professionalism to Northwood. Dr. Fry referred to David as a passionate colleague who bled Northwood blue and would roll up his sleeves to do anything to help advance the university. A former student shared, "I cherished Dr. Fry as a mentor. His calm demeanor always provided a stable environment where people felt comfortable sharing, debating, and growing." Living in higher education, David knew he needed to establish solid academic credentials. Fortuitously, during a difficult time at Northwood in the mid-1970s, David accepted a sabbatical to earn his doctorate in business administration. And David was a humble man. When the Northwood Board of Trustees appointed him president and CEO of the Northwood Institute in 1982, making him one of the youngest college presidents in the United States, David quoted a University of Chicago president who said, "To find a college president, one must identify someone capable of handling the position and foolish enough to accept it." David said, "I at least had the second qualification." David's term as president proved he was more than capable of handling the position. As our president, David's passion was to create an environment for generations of students to value individual freedom and responsibility, earned success, moral law, and the importance of free enterprise, Northwood's philosophy. David proudly exemplified these institutional tenets of the Northwood idea and helped to create an environment where these passions could be passed to future generations of students. His legacy includes leading Northwood through significant change, including growing the university academically from an institute to a university and opening the DeVos Graduate School of Management in 1993. During their time as first couple at Northwood, David and Claudia graciously hosted many school events in their Midland home. Claudia played an integral role in the growth of Northwood's international endeavors. With her husband and senior staff, she helped develop the first transfer program for European students as an international student advisor. She also created adventure tours for Friends of Northwood, guiding over 20 trips abroad to Central and South America, Europe, and Southeast Asia. And these proceeds from these trips funded the scholarships for our international students. David was an ideas man, the Northwood idea. He built on the Turners and Stauffers' dream of the Northwood idea. In 1984, he presented at the Newcomen Society, where he stated, "Northwood, in essence, is not defined by a place or even a program, but an idea. The idea that a quality education for management in the context of enterprise and entrepreneurship must exist with an appreciation for the artistic and creative spirit of mankind. David was the epitome of the Northwood idea in everything we do," stated Dr. Robert Serum, a longtime academic leader and innovator of international programs at Northwood. David Fry expertly championed the cause of free enterprise, which manifested in increased enrollments, strong financial footings, and remarkable expansion. Most importantly, he showed us what free enterprise, limited government, and personal responsibility could do to change lives. Dr. Fry's influence on Northwood University is enduring. Despite retiring in 2006 and his passing on December 19th, 2023, his legacy continues to live within our hearts and across the Northwood University campus. David Fry embodied the Northwood idea philosophy and our fresh air code of ethics like no other, inspiring current and future generations. Thank you, David. So now let's hear from a few friends and colleagues who celebrate the life and achievements of Dr. Fry. Nancy Barker dedicated 33 years of her life to Northwood, also serving under David as the Marketing and University Relations Vice President. With heartfelt reflection, Nancy will share a few words about David.
Well, hi, I'm Nancy Barker, and I ended as the Vice President for University Relations and Assistant to the President. So that was a lot of fun too. David started as a young man, and he carried Northwood from the earliest days. Remember, you could take 2 years and you could receive an associate degree, and then you could take 2 more years and get your bachelor's degree. Our promise to them was that we were preparing them for the world of work. And it was wonderful to see, because I think we were influencing attitudes and giving opportunities that some of these students, kids, had never had before. So that part was wonderful. So we started, that's where he started. We went from one plateau to another, ever higher. And David led us through that changing of plateaus. The MBA program, the international programs, outreaching across the seas, eventually all of the distinctive programs that Northwood University founded. He also built on the past. David did not reject the past, he built on it, and he treasured it, and he appreciated it. And I think that all of us were, in those days, young and experienced. There was no alumni to work with, you know. That's why we had our National Women's Board and Friends. We had people from all over the country who were interested in the free enterprise system, but we also wanted people to be good community citizens too. And we were excited about all the new programs and the career programs. So I think David's big contribution is that he was steady, always a steady hand through all these phases of Northwood through his many years, as a matter of fact. And always someone you could count on and you could always take seriously. He was a serious man. David made memorable impressions on almost everybody. He was an eloquent speaker, as you've heard, I'm sure, from many people. He was a friend to people. It was interesting. For instance, the trustees knew they could trust him. David was pragmatic. He was businesslike. He knew he was running the business side of Northwood. David saw us through all of the evolution of getting Northwood onto a firm financial footing. In terms of influence on students, this immeasurable. I can't tell you how many students I know and have known over the years who just idealized and idolized Dr. Fry. It was a pleasure for them. It was a thrill for them to actually talk with him personally. And he did have time for every student, always did.
Awesome words, Nancy. Thank you. Now, please welcome Dr. Jeffrey A. Bennett to the podium. Jeff was a beloved professor and department chair at Northwood. He dedicated 34 years to our students and to the university's accounting program. Jeff.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. David Edward Fry. I had the good fortune of meeting David Fry and his parents in August of 1965. That's when I drove from Grand Blanc, Michigan, which is where I lived at the time, down to Berkeley, Michigan, which Berkeley, to me, that was Detroit. That was now Detroit. We had talked on the telephone several times, but we had not met in person until then. I mentioned to David that his parents must be very organized because they named him David Edward Fry. And I said, he was the first person that I had ever met whose initials were in alphabetical order, D-E-F. We had both accepted offers of employment from R3 Turner and R. Gary Stauffer to teach at a relatively small school in Midland, Michigan, Northwood Institute. We would live together for 4 years at 804 Village in the Village Apartments on campus. We actually started the week before school started in 1965 and lived in another apartment, one of the 2-bedroom apartments, because our apartment was still under construction. And so we started in this 2-bedroom apartment, and then school started, but our apartment wasn't ready yet. There was no front door. There was a piece of plywood. There was a table saw in the living room. So it was definitely not finished. So it was very interesting for us to start our new careers as college instructors, kind of camping out on campus. We consider ourselves very fortunate that Dr. Turner and Dr. Stauffer took a chance on 3 young teachers that year, David Fry, Dale Haywood, and Jeff Bennett. We talked over the years, the 3 of us, about the fact that we were so lucky to get paid for doing what we love to do. David was an intelligent, personable, inquisitive colleague. He was brilliant. He was a true teacher and leader. He would carefully listen and evaluate before he would comment. He was a person who created relationships with others. He was a great decision maker and built teams and then worked with those teams. I remember I told him once, I should have told him more than once this, but I told him once he should go on Jeopardy because he knows so much about so many different things. He would do great on Jeopardy. He had a terrific vocabulary, and I had to get out my dictionary many times after some of our talks just so I could figure out what I had just agreed to do with him. David and I had many interesting conversations over the years on how we could enrich our students and engage them in the free enterprise philosophy. We knew that we had an opportunity to make an impact on all of these young students. We knew we had to make them productive so they could add value to any organization that they might join. Northwood could only survive and prosper if our students performed. David was a true teacher, and he was a workhorse. He would spend hours and hours, weekend after weekend, week after week, creating his white papers, which he would then use in the classroom with his students, and he would use them with fellow faculty members too. The only writing that David and I did together was the creation of a manual we wrote for our students. At the time, Northwood Institute did not have a placement office. They didn't even have a person that did anything in placement. We were a small 2-year college. So we decided that we should try to help the students that were looking for employment. So we wrote up our manual explaining resumes, interviewing, proper attire, networking, all of the things that you needed to do. And we called our manual NIPS, N-I-P-S, Northwood Institute Placement Service. We ran off on a Mimeo machine and we stapled these together, the 2 of us, and we gave them to students, and we hoped that they helped them. You know, of course, that David went on to author many, many, many other things. He worked hard for Northwood, and he knew all the facets of the school. And he knew them so well because he had held so many different positions within Northwood University, especially before he became president. So I think that's one of the reasons he was so good at it, because he had lived it for so long. As has already been mentioned, he was the president for more than 24 years, and that's the longest serving president of Northwood. And if you look even at other universities, 24 years is a long time to be a president of any university. But he did it, and he did it well. We all loved him, and we miss him. David was also a great family man. He loved his wife, Claudia, his two children, Julie and Daniel, their spouses, and his two grandchildren, Jack and Madeline. He was a good friend who had a tremendous impact on so many people. We are so blessed to have known and been influenced by such a great, caring man. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Jeff. And now Dr. Catherine Chen will share a few memories. Catherine devoted over 30 years of service to Northwood. She served in various roles, including the Director of Library Services, Academic Dean, Provost, and President of the Michigan campus.
My name is Catherine Chen, and I've worked for Northwood for 35 years. I have been to the librarian and also the academic dean and provost of Michigan campus. David was a man of integrity. He's very charismatic. He cares about people, very honest and very eloquent. So he, these are the things he can really, connect with people. So with all these different groups, he can make a deep connection and keep a communication going. One thing I remember was, even after I retired, when my mom died, he was the first person to call. And when my son was in the graduate program about to finish his degree, and David wrote him a personal letter, telling him, give him encouragement. All that just says his concern, his care, and his love for people, and they reciprocated. He is a builder. He was a builder. He built Northwood from an institute to a 4-year program to university, and guided us through many of the accreditations. So Northwood became a renowned university. And there are many, many extension programs. And he built up the international program and eventually our graduate school. Our graduates are making a difference in the world. They are holding good positions in corporations. And many of them, I would say 1/3 or 1/2 of them are getting into their own businesses and very successfully. And now their kids, the second generation, now maybe the third generation of students, their kids are coming back to school, to Northwood. And that says a lot about David. Now, I just want to give my condolences to his family because, he has a lovely family, Julie and Daniel and Claudia, we've known them for years and years, and we saw the kids grow up and become very successful. So I just want to give my love and condolences.
Thank you, Catherine. Now please welcome Mr. Jeffrey Phillips to the podium. Jeff was the professor and director of Northwood's honors programs, and with over 42 years of loyal service to the university. Jeff?
I have a note here that says accounting is fun. I don't know. exactly what that has to do with David, but it's here nonetheless. David used to say at Christmas parties that we attended quite often, yearly, it's good to be with family during the holidays. And it is truly good to be with family today. His family, the Northwood family, his personal family, the faculty, the staff. He was one of the first persons I ever heard who said, "We're not an organization, we're a family." And that stuck with me, and it still does. I think that's one of the most heartfelt and wonderful things that I've ever heard an organization say. There are three items that I always remember and associate with David. One was his humor. He had a tremendous sense of humor. Secondly, as Mr. Bennett has suggested, vocabulary. As an English teacher, I learned more English from him than in the 7 years of college I had studied. I learned, even before it was popularized, that there was a word that was not referring to 2 silver coins, but something else, a paradigm. That was one of his big words, long before it became popular. Obsequious, which is what he called me quite often. And there were others. Other things that he called me. As a junior faculty member, when I first came in 1976, I was all spit and vinegar, I guess, and I was eager to try and get people involved in the process of learning. And luckily, I was surrounded with people that I still admire and honor today. David was one of them. Mr. Bennett was one of them. Dale Haywood was one of them. I was surrounded by people that were just amazing people. And it allowed me to feel very comfortable in the classroom. Dale Haywood used to say, "I feel most comfortable when I'm in the classroom." And that kind of made me feel like it was okay to feel good in front of a group. But David's sense of humor was the thing that gave me a lot of feeling of academic freedom. I'd like to share just a couple quick ideas with you. One day, it was a very hard week that we had gone through. I think it was drop an ad and so forth. And anyone who's gone through drop an ad knows, especially in the pre-computer days, where we had to fill out individual IBM cards for each individual student for each class. And we had to sign them all. It was a tough week. And I remember Kevin Fagan and Tim Nash, whom you'll hear in a minute, and I were just kind of hovering around Margie Knappik's desk. Margie wasn't there at that time, but we were kind of joking around, blowing off steam. And as I said, these were in the days before political correctness was really popular. And we probably strayed over the line a couple times. But as we were joking around, we heard from above us a bright, heavy chuckle. And we all leaned over and looked up, and there was David leaning over, listening to everything we had said. And we immediately felt incredibly embarrassed by what we had just said. He said a couple jokes, made us laugh, got us very comfortable. And then we figured, well, he went back to his office. So I think it was probably Tim who went a little bit more politically incorrect at that point, and made a joke. And in the silence that ensued after that joke, we found 3 pink slips falling from the sky. And we looked at him and went, well, okay, I guess it's about time to go. But it was that kind of humor that allowed us in years to come to feel comfortable around the powers that be. Barb Sumi, a professor of accounting, Gene Beckham, who at that point was the head of the natural science and math department, and I made a little presentation at one of our summits where all three campuses gathered together to find out what was good about Northwood and what could be improved. And at that point, David had instituted a wonderful program whereby everybody on campus got a copy of the Wall Street Journal every day. And during the winter, I had to actually pry it up out of my driveway because they were in plastic bags and it stuck to the snow. But we decided, you know, we should show people that there's more than one use for the Wall Street Journal. Barb made a suit out of the Wall Street Journal, top and bottom and everything. Gene had a tie. We started to talk about the various things that you could do for it. Lining bird cages was an alternative way to use the Wall Street Journal when we were finished reading it. Composting was another. And we didn't know at the time, but the representatives of the Wall Street Journal were there. And we learned this right before we went on. And we had about a 10-minute routine where we were just raucously making fun of the Wall Street Journal. Well, David was in very good humor, and he later let us know that the Wall Street Journal folk, in fact, wanted a tape of that so that they could play it at their meetings. But that was the kind of humor that David employed. It was wonderful. It pushed me at one point to start an underground newspaper, which was available only to faculty and staff, called The Latest Ludicrous Bull. And it made fun of everybody on campus in good humor, kind of like The Onion, if any of you remember The Onion. And I think I regret this now, but at the time I thought this is going to be so funny. I found a very complimentary photograph of Jackie Gleason and put it on the cover front page, and then put David's picture next to it. And I said, twins separated at birth. Later got back to me through Tim Nash. He said, that was really, really funny. But that was the stupidest thing you could have done. Daniel said in his little tribute in the Northwood Idea that David was known for writing letters. And he did. He wrote letters to people. And we would, whenever we got one of those, we would run to lunch and go, I got a letter from David. Anyone else? No? Well, all right. And David wrote me a letter after that little newspaper. He said, and this goes into his vocabulary, with some degree of circumlocutory skill, you have couched the absinthian vehemence of your address in a paraphrastic bit of casuistry, which is paralogistic on the one hand and incapacious on the other. Your Jeremiad, your threnody, call it what you will, can only be accepted for what it is, an atrabilius amphibole. And I read it and I said, oh yeah, that's it. Okay. It was not written on pink paper, so I thought I had a chance still. Now that's about his vocabulary, that's about his humor. I want to talk about his humanity just for a second. This is very dear to me. Through the years, my wife, well, when we were first married, my wife contracted MS, not because we got married, but she's had it for about 43 years now, and she is bedbound. But in those days when we could attend the Christmas parties and the Northwood dinners, we did. And she was in a wheelchair during 1 year. This is the last time she went. And David had just suffered some challenges, health challenges of his own. But he walked right over to Joyce. She was the first person he walked to. And I'll never forget it because he got down on one knee and he looked her right in the eye And this was the hallmark of this man. He talked to you. He didn't talk at you. He talked to you. And he looked her right in the eye. And he said, "Joyce, how are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm coming through okay. Everything's all right." She said, "How are you?" And for a moment, they had a real strong bond there. He said, I'm doing fine too. And they talked. And then he went over and he grabbed her hand. And he looked her right in the eye and he said, "We're both survivors. You can say whatever you want about me. You can treat me any way you like. But when you treat my family with that kind of love, you have my undying respect." David Fry was a truly great man. And as Mr. Bennett said, we are truly blessed to have been in his company and to have known him and to have grown with him. Thank you, family.
Thank you, Jeff, for the lightheartedness and the seriousness of your remarks. Now we'll hear from Dr. Timothy Nash. Tim has been with Northwood for over 40 years and has held various roles, most recently as director of the McNair Center. Tim recently led the President's Task Force on the review and renewal of the Northwood Idea. I'm sure David Fry would be proud of the initiatives that have come from these efforts. So here we go for Tim.
Okay, my name is Tim Nash, and I am currently the Senior Vice President Emeritus, and I'm the Director of the Robert C. and Janice S. McNair Center for the Advancement of Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship. Whoever met David liked David. David was always a very positive person, always very upbeat. You know, if there was a problem and David thought it was going to be a problem for the university, he wasn't on you, he wasn't belittling you. He was saying, "All right, how did this happen and how are we going to fix it?" So, you know, whether it be as a colleague or, you know, as a student, when David would come in and guest lecture, students would say, "Wow, he would have been great to have as a professor." So those are things that, you know, make a big, big difference to me. And I, you know, for me personally, I can tell you stories about how as a student, I listened to David talk about graduate school, and he inspired me to go to graduate school. And some of my colleagues that or my classmates that I stay in contact with today went on to graduate school because of David Fry. The Frys had a cottage first on Lake Ogemaw, about an hour north and east of here. And they were always kind to invite us for a weekend or a week at the cottage, and our families got along quite well. And you know, David was quite the boater on Lake Ogemaw, and then after a while, they bought a place and fixed it up on Lake Michigan, and they continued to invite us up there, and just getting to know the Fry family and David and Claudia. And Claudia was born in, I believe it was West Germany at the time, and you know, we just learned a lot about a wonderful family and much more about the world because of the Frys. And then Claudia used to take a group of Northwood, you know, benefactors, friends of the university on trips around the world. And Pam spent 2 weeks with Claudia in Morocco. So those are just fond memories on a personal side. And then, you know, for me, I had come across a book called The Commanding Heights, and it was also a 6-hour 3 DVD series by PBS. And I bought David a copy of the book and a copy of the DVD series because I knew David would be very interested in it. It literally covered the entire 20th century. And so it took the world economy from 1900 to the early 2000s. And it went right through the Chicago School and freedom and free markets, which David was educated in at Hillsdale. I was educated in at Northwood. And so I gave them to him, and he asked me to come up to the cottage. We watched the first hour of it together, or the first 2 hours, and I had to be back in Midland. And he then called me and told me he had watched the whole series, and then later he wrote me a long note and told me that it was just incredibly valuable to him because he wasn't certain how much he would have or how easy he would have gotten through that weekend, because his family was in Europe and he had just found out that he had prostate cancer, or bladder cancer, I'm sorry. And that he battled for a long time and eventually overcame. It was just, that was just an amazing moment and courage for me that a person would, just think of the intellectual side and the personal side to get through a very difficult time. And he had his, wonderful, loving family to rely on. But that, for me, those are my two, favorite, what I would describe as personal moments with David, or special moments with David.
Thank you to Tim, and thanks to all our presenters this morning for the kind reflections, the humor, and getting to know David from their perspective. At this time, I'd like to invite Julie and Daniel Fry to the podium.
Yeah.
You okay? You can move that.
Our dad had a way with words, as we've heard from several people already, and we've all been moved by his eloquence. One reason he was so effective as an educator and as a leader is that he was at his core a master storyteller. He used this gift to entertain, to educate, to evangelize, and to enrich all of our lives. Through his stories, Dad shaped our lives and illuminated his core principles. So today, Dan and I would like to share with you some stories and observations, both big and small, silly and serious, of things that Dad said or did over the years that made an impression on us growing up.
When we were little kids, Dad told the most fantastic bedtime stories. He worked late nights and he was tired in the evening, but he always made time for us. Sometimes when he was really tired, the bedtime stories would border on ludicrous. I remember one time, after a very long, detail-oriented narrative, all of a sudden something called him back, and the king ate the queen ate the king, and they all went out the window. Good night and good luck.
Some of his storytelling he did as our family cinematographer. Dad had a fabulous, enormous plastic black VHS camcorder that he would take out for every major family celebration. He'd make sure the batteries were charged, get the VHS family videos tape rewound to the right position. And year after year, he recorded our family antics, running around in the garden that still had snow in it to find our Easter baskets, or singing Christmas carols, or decorating the Christmas tree in our living room. He's not in most of these videos, of course, because he's behind the camera, but every once in a while you hear his directorial prompts. Say, Dan, what did you find? Julie, who's that just arrived?
Tim mentioned Ogama, which is where our family's heart grew. Dad was an expert corn shucker. Every summer we would get corn on the cob and boil it, and we would shuck it on the deck. That features prominently in the videos Julie mentioned. And he also loved to build a bonfire. That was a way that he brought our family together. He would stack the logs just so. Sometimes he needed a hammer and nails. Don't tell anybody about that. And sometimes he needed a little lighter fluid. He wasn't a Boy Scout, okay, is what I'm saying. But he recognized the value of bringing people together. And so we both have many fond memories of sitting around the bonfire, toes in the sand, eyes in the stars, telling stories, singing songs, and making s'mores in the hottest part right underneath where the coals are orange.
And then if you wanted to ride on the family boat, Yanidan, you had to wear a PFD. This is not an acronym that everyone knows, but in our family, everyone knows that PFD stands for Personal Flotation Device. Before he'd take you wave running, so you had to wear this before he'd take you wave running behind Joe Leguermo's boat, or drag you behind his boat on the inner tube, which was one of the most fun things to do on Lake Ogama. Good, safety first, okay. anytime before you rode on the boat, you had to pass the swimming test, which was to swim 1 lap around the boat. But you could wear your PFD.
You know, much like our dad, a PFD doesn't prevent you from making mistakes, but it supports you when you make them. When we were nearly old enough to appreciate them, nearly, with a twinkle in his bright blue eyes, Dad told us stories of a wayward adolescence, let's say. It ultimately landed him in military boarding school, to be fair. His alter ego was named Marimullen Xavier Frabnasty III. And Marimullen either committed or imagined a lot of funny antics. For example, finding a weather balloon, surplus weather balloon, and inflating it inside of a telephone box with inward folding accordion doors. Think about how you got that out of there. Or locating a tractor tire on top of a hill and wondering, I wonder if this will roll all the way down to the police station at the bottom. And in fact, it did, and it didn't stop.
Military boarding school did not completely cure Frabnasty of his mischief. He also told us some fabulous stories from college, where his fraternity had a pet penguin that lived in the bathtub, but would come out for parties. So many of you know the penguin was our dad's sort of spirit animal. They also had a friend whose name was Heavy, who would drink a pint of motor oil if you gave him $1.
Later on at home in Midland, Dad loved music, but not background music. It had to be the primary focus. He had a very eclectic taste. He loved church pipe organs, E-Power Bigs, and he liked Pet Shop Boys, disco, and he even liked Moog synthesizer of Ray Lynch's new wave sounds. Yeah. It was a real privilege to be invited into his office and put the headphones on his fancy stereo and listen to a new CD. And sometimes if he was feeling relaxed, he would reminisce about his time marching with the band, and he would even drum out a cadence on the table with his fingers. You've probably heard him do that.
Dad excelled at little acts of kindness. After teasing me for storing my peanut butter collection on my glasses, he would take them to the kitchen sink and clean them with hot water and dish soap to make sure I could go to school with a clear view of the world. And then later, once I started driving to school, Michigan winters are tough, and he would go out early and turn on the ignition of my 1984 Volkswagen Rabbit so it was warm so I could have a warm ride to school.
You even named it Le Lupin du Choix.
Yes.
I remember. When Mom and Dad used to go out for formal Northwood events, which happened quite frequently, Mom would wear her fancy perfume and her special mink coat, and Dad would put on his penguin suit, as we called it, spirit animal, which was his tuxedo. But on special academic events, he would don his academic regalia with brown chevrons to signify his Doctor of Business Administration, of which he was very proud. Most of the time, though, his regular uniform was a navy blazer and gray slacks, and he carried this enormous, boxy, brown briefcase. Nobody knew what the heck he carried around in it because it was 4 times the size it needed to be. We had a joke that he carried a spare water pump just in case his car needed servicing. Some other things that he carried around with him, he always had a black chapstick. He always had window green flavor, lifesavers for his breath, presumably. He carried a comb, money clip, and critically, a lamy pen, which was a sentimental gift from his mother-in-law, Magda Waldman. He'd be happy to lend you his pen, unless you lost it. And if you lost that lamy pen, you would never borrow a pen from him again.
Another object that we both associate with Dad is his typewriter, which was set up in the library in his home office at our house. If you ever received a typed and signed note from our dad, know that he pecked those out, those notes of gratitude, two fingers per hand, late at night, late in the evenings in his home office, on a vaguely threatening-looking IBM Selectric typewriter. So Daniel and I drifted to sleep to the click-clack sound of our dad's gratitude as he typed notes to people. You might call it, he was working late on these things because they were important to him, or you might call it trying to put 8 pounds of sand into a 5-pound bag.
He didn't always say sand. It wasn't just the Northwood idea. Dad loved all big ideas. You heard, actually, Tim just talked about, I don't know if you heard Julie and I kind of laughing, the commanding heights, the economic history of the basically 20th century was a super favorite of his. And I appreciate that Tim gave it to him. Now I know who to thank, because we spent entire spring break one year listening to the DVDs together as a family. I'm sure you've all heard him say, no single economic system has lifted more people out of poverty in the history of the world as capitalism. And he was a true believer. He also was really excited about 1421 and this concept that the Chinese explorers had visited North America prior to Christopher Columbus. And even in retirement, he was very interested in big ideas. He joined Claudia's, my mother's, Great Decisions Foreign Policy Discussion Group in Florida in retirement.
So Dad was a strong proponent of internationalization in higher education. We've also heard that from others. He believed strongly that it is the differences between us that make us useful to one another. Over the years, we had a series of Northwood students that lived with our family as foreign exchange students. And so that even brought this value of internationalization home to our house as well.
Our parents really wanted us to learn the value of money and the virtues of frugality. And so Julie and I both had summer jobs growing up. Dad exhorted us, always be worth more than you cost. Sounds like someone else has heard that too. As a family, we didn't splash out on fancy things very much, but there was an exception for life-changing experiences. One good example of that was our Western Civ capstone course, which was the family vacation we took to the birthplace of civilization to celebrate Julie's graduation from college and mine from high school. We made great memories together on these trips.
Dad was as good of a listener as he was of an orator. He role modeled for us how and why to treat people with dignity and respect. And he was also proud that he could listen to 3 people making 3 different points each, and then summarize for the group the 10 or 11 key points that had been collected.
Midland, Northwood, our parents, all of you shaped wonderful lives for us. Dad freely shared the fruits of his efforts, promoted his free market philosophy, and imprinted these ideas on generations of students, colleagues, and on us. But he was right. He used to say, time is the only truly independent variable.
He was telling us to spend our resources wisely and to focus on what truly matters. He might have even called this putting in the big rocks first. He gave us a beautiful example of a life spent building meaningful institutions and relationships. And it's an example which we both strive to emulate. Thanks for that, Dad.
Thanks, Dad. This is a bit of a receipt. Sure, you want to keep that on this one? Just in case. You can never be too safe. Thanks a lot.
Julie and Daniel, thanks for sharing these special moments growing up with your mom and dad. David Fry was a remarkable member of the family. In some ways, he was really the Northwood family. He was part of our Northwood family and led us in many, many ways. Next, we're going to hear from Kent McDonald. President McDonald and First Lady Dr. Mary Ellen McPhee are champions of Northwood's missions and ambitious vision and principled values. Together, they create a welcoming environment for all. Kent?
Good morning. Morning. Stories were fantastic. Listening to them, I really appreciated them, and hopefully I can intertwine some of those stories into what I have to share this morning. When David Fry walked onto this campus, a professor of economics at the age of just 22, A university president in America at that time lasted about 12 to 15 years. 40 years after that, about the time David was considering retirement, a president's length of service had fallen dramatically, down to 8 years. Another decade later, around 2016, the average term for a president in this country had fallen to 6.5 years. And today, in 2024, university presidents in the United States, their tenure lasts 5.9 years. So today, we gather as friends and colleagues to celebrate an intellectual, a university administrator, as you've heard, an orator of the highest regard, an entrepreneur, and a gentleman whose unwavering commitment to Northwood defied the odds. We gather here today to honor David Fry, who led this university with distinction, passion, and love, imagined for a quarter of a century. So perhaps more important than the length of service was his level of impact at Northwood. During his time at the helm, David brought the stability and continuity and leadership required to transform Northwood University from a rural educational institute into a thriving hub of intellectual exchange and a marketplace of ideas. He advanced us from a humble campus in Midland, Michigan, to a university with reach and impact literally around the world. So this is a really special day for us at Northwood. I'm honored to join you in celebration of a remarkable individual, Northwood's fourth and undoubtedly, in my view, the most transformational president that we've ever had. And so on behalf of our trustees, let me extend a warm Northwood welcome to everyone here today, and welcome colleagues and supporters and friends all. Claudia and Daniel and Julie, the entire Fry family, I imagine this is an emotional day for you, but we're so pleased that you're here on campus. And let me extend also a warm Northwood welcome to Northwood's fifth president, Keith Priddy, who joins us today. To all who gather in this beautiful space and those watching online, I suspect this feels somewhat like a reunion for some of you. So welcome home, everybody. Let me now switch my thoughts to the fourth president of Northwood University, Dr. David Fry. Look, I've been an educator for most of my professional life. But in preparing my remarks for this morning, I found I was lost for words at times. Perhaps there was a good reason for that. When someone becomes a university administrator at 26, and then tasked to launch a new campus in Indiana at 27, is involved in developing academic programs across the globe in his 30s, creates and launches a beautiful new campus in Florida, and then becomes one of the youngest university presidents in America, I suppose I have some right to be in awe of writing these remarks. But let me just continue to frame this man just a little bit further. Not only was David a great administrator, but he had the respect of faculty. In part because only 2 years, as you heard earlier, after his arrival at Northwood, the students chose David as the most outstanding professor. And if that wasn't good enough, they chose him again the next year. As president, he further cultivated and expanded our campus in Texas, established a research library in Maine to honor the first woman to serve in the houses of the United States Congress. He positioned this small Michigan university as a national leader in distance education, way above its time compared to other schools. And David was so committed to the distinct free enterprise purpose of this institution that he committed to extending its mission and reach literally around the world. There's a lot of talk about leadership in higher education these days. Often it's hard to describe, but we know it when we see it. But if you want a case study in higher education leadership, look no further than President Fry. But effectively managing and leading a university goes beyond leadership. Great presidents also need to understand and practice effective management. And once again, Northwood had a gem in having David Fry lead us for that many years. He understood how to grow enrollment, how to balance a budget, how to invest, where to invest, and when to save and when to spend. And he had the discipline to create an investment fund worth millions that would continue to benefit from today. But perhaps one of David's greatest gifts was knowing where Northwood fit in a very crowded higher education marketplace of over 4,500 colleges and universities across the country. David Fry was an unabashed champion of the Northwood mission. He was a president committed to developing the next generation of free enterprise leaders, leaders committed to limited government in our life, private property, and the rule of law. But who was David Fry? So impressive of all of perhaps what I've just laid out, I've simply described what David did, and perhaps more important in my view is trying to get a better understanding of who was David Fry. What made this gentleman so special? The question for me started when I had the first opportunity with Mary Ellen to meet David 5 years ago. Some of you were there in Bay Harbor. It was August 3rd, 2019. It was a Sunday, a sunny Saturday. We were at the Bay Harbor Yacht Club. And as I shared with Julie and Daniel last night, it was great having our private conversation, by the way. Thank you. I recall exactly where Mary Ellen and I were sitting that morning on Saturday. We were one row behind David and Claudia, and I was just off the left shoulder of David. On that morning, we listened to Dr. Nash, who's listening in from New York today, and an alumnus, Jonathan Williams from Washington, and they delivered the 13th annual Bay Harbor Symposium. At the end of that session, Mary Ellen and I had a chance to go over and spend some time with David and Claudia. And as we concluded our discussion, I recall as clearly as I stand here and see you before me, David reaching out, maybe a little bit like he did to you, Jeff, put his hand on my arm and he said, "You'll do a great job. If you ever need anything, just call." So over the next couple of years, I did. I checked in with him on occasion, and I recall early on, in fact, we had some significant changes to make that first fall. I gave him a call and he shared some of his thoughts. 3 months later, COVID arrived. 3 months after that, the flood covered the water covered the campus. And at all times, David Fry was happy to provide advice if I wanted it, and I appreciated it. But it was in the summer of 2022 that was really the tipping point for me in getting to know David. We were back at Bay Harbor, and David had received Northwood's inaugural Wings of Freedom Award. It was a great night. After David received the award, I said to both him and Claudia that it's time to come back to the campus. We want to show you what we've been up to. It'd be an honor to have you on campus. And it worked, right, Claudia? Over the past 2 years, we've been able to get David to return to campus on 3 occasions. One of those was last June when David and Claudia joined us at the President's Freedom Celebration. And by the way, our next Freedom Celebration is next Thursday night, and you're all welcome to join us. The second visit that I recall was just this past October. When David joined us on a sunny but cool day to attend the unveiling of the founder's statue, Warren and I and Jeff Stauffer tried to steal the show, but David stole the show that day. And by way of that, I received an email from Jeff Stauffer just this week. Jeff wanted me to know that he wouldn't be able to make it, but Chris was here to represent the Stauffers. Welcome, Chris. But he also shared some thoughts that I thought I'd share with you as well today. Jeff wrote this: when Dad and Dr. Turner turned over the presidential reins to David, who would have thought what an impact he would have on the growth and changes in university stature, global infrastructure, diversity and student expansion, the donor base outreach, and most importantly, the impact on the students and faculty in administration. He was loved and inspired so many. I agreed with Jeff. Yet of the 3 times David has been on this campus since I've been here, his first return to campus that really helped me understand who David Fry was, not as an exceptional higher education leader, which he was, but something much more important. You heard it this morning, a human being. It was the summer of 2022 after that Bay Harbor event, and I received a note from Claudia, who asked if we might consider hosting the former Northwood executive team. The elders. That was my line, Claudia. The elders. Claudia thought it might be nice to bring them here rather than going up north and meet on the campus. And so as it happened, the Barkers and the Bennetts, the Chens and the Hunkins and the Longs and the Frys all would return to campus, and we were thrilled with that. However, to make this happen, Claudia laid down some very tough rules. Actually, it was just a gentle caveat that she gave us. She wanted me to know that there would be no need for special attention. The elders would like a short tour of the campus, followed by a quiet lunch in NADA, where we're going to meet later, but no fuss. On that day, Mary Ellen and I were the lucky ones because Claudia asked us to join them for lunch. So what was the significance of a lunch on a campus like that? To put the full story in context, I need to remind you that David left the presidency in August of 2006. For the man who transformed this university, it would be 16 years until Dr. Fry returned to campus. 6,000 days before he would return to the campus he loved and the university that loved him back. So on October 12th, 2020, the elders began the return with a tour of the campus. Justin Marshall, our great concierge, provided them the tour. And our guests completed their tour and then gathered in NADA for lunch, a place that held fond memories, particularly for you, Claudia, but for everyone in the group. I remember the lunch well. We had a large table. Don Hunkins was to my right and Dave Long was to my left. And as was noted earlier, it's a sense of sadness that we also lost 2 of those gentlemen this year. But on that afternoon, I remember I was facing the door in one of those side classrooms in NADA, and across the table with their backs to the door were David and Claudia. We had just received the first setting of food. It was the salad, the things you remember. And the conversations commenced, and it was just so much fun. But wow, they gave each other a hard time. But there was great laughter and wonderful stories filled the air. It was their time. It was the elders' time. There was a private luncheon just as Claudia requested. What's that? No, no. Come on up here, Chloe. Yeah, that's right. Oh, the golden plates. That's right. Yeah, it was just for me, selfishly, it was just a fabulous experience to be in the presence of these remarkable people. And as lunch progressed, the main dishes were served. And I recall at that time, David, with his back still to the door, started to share a reflection of a story. I don't remember what that story was because I was distracted. I was distracted because beyond David, the door had crept open. It was like a Seinfeld episode. Over David's shoulder was not one or two or three, there were four heads peeking in around the corner, trying to get a glimpse of the guests in the room that afternoon. Now, some on campus had to know that the elders were coming. We had some planning to take care of. The irony of those four people peering through the opening in the door were the very people who should not have come that day. Half of our HR department, Margie and Cheryl, were there. And they're here today. Before long, David noticed that everyone's eyes were starting to look over his shoulder and see what was going on behind them. And our sleuths could not handle it anymore. They burst into the room. And that's when magic occurred. Over the next 30 minutes, we're a small campus, the word got out. President Fry and First Lady Fry were back on campus. That's all it took. All hell broke loose. And for the next couple of hours, we had person after person after person coming over. I don't know if we ever even finished the lunch that afternoon, Chloe and Nancy. But I would say the stories that were told, the tears that were shed, the pictures that were taken, it was a great experience for all of us. And I would say October 12th, 2022, probably was the most beautiful moment I've had so far at Northwood. I could write, and I did write, an entire dissertation on higher education leadership. I could have saved myself a lot of effort if I just simply wrote what I learned about leadership that afternoon in NADA. On that day, David Fry gave me a master class in terms of leadership. He reminded me what really counts in leadership. It's not what you do or what you say. In the end, leadership is all about how you treat those who actually do the actual work at these institutions. So let me conclude this way. David believed in the power of business for certain, but he also believed in the arts, right, Nancy? That's why we're showcasing art donations around the campus now. On the walls, statues on the mall walk, and we're thankful for the donations. We think that art enhances the intellectual vibrancy of a university campus. And beyond the physical art, another form of art is poetry. It allows us to understand and experience the world in unique and profound ways, distilling complex ideas and emotions into concise verses, rhythm, and rhyme. I think about David, and I thought about David a lot trying to prepare my remarks today. And I read a poem that reflected a notion of wonder. I won't read it all, I'll just read a few lines to you. It reads, I wonder as I roam the earth so vast, what secrets lie within the shadows cast. In every corner a story to unfold, a tapestry of wonders waiting to be told. I wonder as I feel the warmth of the sun, what dreams and hopes will a new day bring? With each dawn a chance to start anew, to chase our passions and see our dreams come true. I was drawn to this notion of wonder when I was thinking of David. It led me to wonder just about a few things that I wanted to share with you. As we gather in this beautiful building, first of all, designed by Alden B. Dow in 1972, I wonder what was going through David's mind as a young man, 7 years into his transformational career at Northwood, the first time he walked into this beautiful space. As a young man, I wonder if David Fry knew that his commitment to Northwood would last through the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s. On the bad days, during challenging moments, I wonder if David knew how many lives that he touched. With kindness, compassion, you heard some of that today. And I wonder if he really understood his unique personality and caring strength, and he tackled challenges throughout the day with grace. And I wonder if David understood the rareness he exhibited when he put Northwood first. When he decided to retire early from the university that he loved, not necessarily because he had to, but because he thought it was the right thing to do. Listen to David's own words in 2006. He wrote, "My responsibility to the future of Northwood requires whatever it takes to encourage smart, able, committed, younger leadership to shape a new team for the vibrancy of this institution, one that I love so much. Simply put, if I go first, there will be a more cohesive leadership team for the future." David Fry was a rare individual. And so as we celebrate David today, I'm hopeful that we can carry that spirit of wonder forward by giving our lives with the same curiosity and appreciation David had of his friends and family and life. In 2006, David provided some parting words. These were his last official comments as president, a university that he built and a university that he truly loved. David said, "I know the pure joy it can bring to watch vibrant student-professor interactions, and I look forward to watching Northwood continue fiercely promote those. That is what happens at Northwood. That is where Northwood magic happens. And the best is yet to come," were his final words. If there was one message that I might leave to everyone, particularly to the Fry family, is that you continue to have our commitment, that this administration team will remain committed to promoting Northwood as America's free enterprise university and carrying on the legacy of Dr. David Fry, with our belief too that the best of Northwood is yet to come. So thank you. Cody and I met each other outside and said, "Okay, we're not going to cry." I would like to, before handing it over to Warren, invite everyone to the NADA building where we had that lunch, where our First Lady, Dr. Mary Ellen McPhee, will be hosting our lunch. On the way, maybe we could also take a moment to visit Founders Garden to see the beautiful statue of our founders, the statue that David visited in October. I'd also like to say that David knew this well. Presidents show up for these events. All the heavy work and the heavy lifting is done by our colleagues. So the advancement team, Murray's team, Justin, and Salva, our ceremonial officer, I want to just honor your work working with the Frys to make this happen. I also want to acknowledge this is the last day. One of the first things that I did when I arrived, I figured that we had some gaps in some really important areas. And I called Warren Malt and I said, "Warren, you got to come back." And he did. This is his last day. So I, in front of everyone, want to thank you.
Thank you, Kent, and you finished my remarks, so I think it's time we can recess from the Griswold Lecture Hall. Please walk across the Mall Walk and visit Founder's Garden. It's an absolutely beautiful place on campus and a great reflection of who we are and what we are. And then find your way to the NADA Center. I think we have some folks out there that will help lead you there. But we are concluded here, and we'll see you at NADA for lunch. And thank you for coming.